I love poetry, and I write poetry, and there are a lot of poems out there. You know, it was said to me one time by a professor that poetry is the language of experience. It can also be the language of the experience of things that have yet to be experienced. And there are poems that decorate language. And then there are poems that really indict the soul. Dylan Thomas's Villanelle that he wrote in 1951, his father was going blind and nearly dead. That poem is not merely a meditation on morality. It's a structured rebellion against diminishment, erasure. The Villanelle form itself, I mean, there's the 19 lines, 2 refrains that are braided through the body of the poem. That in and of itself is a discipline of return. The repetition is not aesthetic. It's not flourish. It's insistence. Do not go gentle into that good night. And rage against the dying of the light. These aren't suggestions. They're commands placed in a liturgical rhythm, forcing those who read this poem into a place of confrontation, forcing you to really confront entropy. See, Thomas concedes that, quote, dark is right, acknowledging the inevitability of death, yet he refuses passivity in the face of it. The poem is not anti-death, it's anti-surrender. It audits a life for unused voltage, for unused fire. I watched Interstellar for the first time this past Sunday, and I was reminded of the poem. And it was recited over and over again, in part as humanity stood on the brink of extinction in this film. And the film situates the lines within cosmic scale: a dying earth, a species suffocating under dust, and the inevitability of just erasure. But the true battlefield is not astrophysical, it is existential. The characters are not merely fighting gravity, they're fighting resignation. And when the poem surfaces in that narrative, it is not sentimental. It is absolutely defiant. It becomes a manifesto for agency in the face of collapse. So watching it, I did not experience nostalgia for the poem. Where I am today in life, I experienced recognition. The lines were not new to me. They struck with renewed force because they intersected a season of my own life where the greater danger was not catastrophe, or what was I trying to say there? Apocalypse. But it wasn't catastrophe, but quiet compromise. Thomas categorizes mankind: the wise, the good, the wild, the grave. He exposes a shared regret. Not that they died, but that they did not burn as brightly as they could have. See, the wise lacked lightning in their words. The good saw their deeds as frail, and the wild misjudged the sun. The grave discovered too late that blind eyes could blaze. The poem is a taxonomy of the underutilized fire. It's not concerned with chronology, but with congruence. I mean, do you live aligned with your capacity, or did you negotiate with diminishment? That question has shaped my own frameworks for the last 3.5 to 4 years. Identity, as I teach it, is not constructed by preference, but discovered through resonance. Misalignment produces anxiety because the self knows when it has compromised. And so the dying of the light is not age. It is the gradual agreement to become less than what you know yourself to be. When I read Thomas now, I do not hear mere rage. I hear oxygen. Rage in this context is not emotional volatility. It is the refusal to cooperate with internal decay. It is the breath forced back into embers. The repetition in this villanelle it mirrors the discipline I demand of myself every single day and the people that I help and coach every day. Return again and again to what is true. Don't drift. Do not soften into becoming palatable. Do not spiritualize passivity as wisdom. The poem's plea to the Father: curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. That is not melodrama. It is a demand for witnessed aliveness. I think that's I don't think that's grammatically correct, but you know what I'm trying to say. Even tears are preferable to numbness. Grief even singles presence. I've learned that the greatest threat to the soul is not suffering, but the greatest threat to the soul is sedation. There was a moment in my own life when the cold of metal in my hand felt like an exit from suffocation, when I nearly chose silence over fire. The temptation was not dramatic. It was very, very quiet. To go gentle. To fade into compliance with expectations that were never truly mine to begin with. That is the good night Thomas warns against. It is not the grave. It is the slow surrender of identity before the body has finished breathing. The poem confronts me because it names the very thing I refuse. A life audited at the end with the realization that my words forked no lightning. If there is rage in me, it is disciplined. It is the structured refusal to dim. It is breath as covenant with presence. It is the insistence that the light entrusted to me will not cooperate with entropy until it has exhausted its absolute purpose. And so I stand in congruence with Thomas, not as a romantic of rebellion, but as a steward of intensity. I don't deny that dark is right. Night comes, bodies age, systems fail, civilizations dust. But there's a way to approach the close of day that is aligned and clear and alive with such ferocity that those who get near it can't help but be warmed or burned. To burn without apology, to speak without dilution, to love without negotiation, to build without shrinking, to accommodate comfort. This poem does not allow distance. It corners the reader and demands an answer. Where have you already begun to fade? If I'm honest, the question steals my breath because it leaves no refuge in abstraction. It forces inventory. It forces honesty, which brings about true humility. Where have I mistaken maturity for withdrawal? Where have I labeled exhaustion as wisdom? Where have I allowed the, quote, edges of my conviction to dull in exchange for ease or comfort? The poem will not permit me to look away. It presses until the lungs expand and the pulse quickens. It is not asking whether I will die. It is asking whether I will live congruently until I do. And that is the landing. That is the point. Not theatrical rage, but denial of limits, but a disciplined blaze that refuses premature surrender. A life so aligned that when night finally arrives, it finds no unused fire left in the chamber. I nearly breathe right out of the point. What's the point of it all? The movie uses this poem to illustrate this idea. Love. Not the sentimental kind, not the fragile version that begs to be held. I'm speaking of the kind that burns without asking permission. The kind that does not dim itself to remain tolerable. The love that doesn't negotiate with fear. I almost missed this point. It was the whole reason that I sat down to write and to speak today. I almost missed it because I was so focused on the fire that I forgot what the fire was for. See, this poem is not a manifesto for anger. It is a defense of love. Why rage against the dying of light? Because light reveals, because light warms. Light makes growth possible. Without light, nothing lives. The refusal to go gentle is not ego clinging to relevance. Oh, what am I good for? It is love refusing to abandon its assignment. If I dim, those entrusted to my light lose warmth. If I soften into resignation, the spaces and the fields that I was meant to ignite remain cold and lifeless. See, love is the point, not performance, not legacy, not even impact in the abstract. Love is the animating force behind the blaze. When Thomas pleads in this writing with his father to rage, he's not asking him to defeat death. He's asking him to remain present, to be fierce, to remain engaged in relationship until the final breath. Rage in that context is relational intensity. It is love refusing to withdraw. And there's a season where I confused fatigue with surrender, where I nearly exhaled my conviction into the dark. But what stopped me was not pride, it was love. Love for my children, love for the truth, love for the work entrusted to my hands, and love for the version of myself that I had finally uncovered beneath the expectation and the fear. And I could not dim because love would not permit it. And here is the reality that lands so hard for us. If love is the point, then gentleness at the wrong time is betrayal. To fade when you are called to burn is not humility, it is abandonment. To shrink when you are meant to stand is not wisdom, it is fear dressed in spiritual language. Love demands presence. It demands oxygen. It demands fire, disciplined and directed toward life. So I will not rage for ego. I will not burn for spectacle. I will burn because I love, and I love without apology. No matter who thinks what. No matter how one may define it. And when the night finally comes, it will not find me dimmed by compromise. No, it'll find me emptied of unused fire. Having loved without retreat, stood without dilution, having given the full measure of light entrusted to me. Love is the point, and that is why I will not go gentle. Are you listening?